This is the third and final round of the 2022 Hi-Tech Oils Australian Super Truck Nationals. It's Lockie Mansell and Gary O'Brien coming to you from a wet Winton Raceway as we get ready to decide who will take glory in the 2022 Australian Super Truck Championship.
It certainly is wet and very cold here today as well, and as we head towards the final three races in the championship, here's our championship points at the moment. Steve Zammit 12 points up on Shannon Smith, Barry Butler in third, Frank Amoroso, we will go into what's happened to him, was in fourth position, Marcus Prilwich, Robert Byrne, Mitchell Prilwich, Mark Schultz, Mark Noonan and Anthony Tringali wrap out our top 10.
It's going to be a hot contest between Stephen Zammit and Shannon Smith at the top of the points table. Shannon Smith trying to hold on to the number one plate that he claimed last time we had a full Super Truck Championship in 2019. Let's catch up with Shannon for his thoughts on defending the title.
Round three, it's the last one. We got cut short because of the track closure at Goulburn, so we'll hopefully come home with the trophy again this year. It's fairly wet yesterday, so today might be the same. We'll see how it goes. Stephen was 12 points ahead, and he came first in qualifying. We got fourth. We came second in the first race, so it's going to be fairly tight to come home with it, but we'll give it our best crack. We had the transmission rebuilt, and we didn't think it was getting top gear, but we put another diff in it as well, which caused a bit of grief. We had two diffs sitting side by side. We ended up with the wrong ratio, but we got it sorted out just in time, and hopefully it pays off. Just get out in front and stay in front. That's probably the key, especially if it comes in wet there. It's hard to get around a wet track. You have a look around the trophy there, and there's some legends on there from a few years ago. So I see Rodney Crick's on there. He's a bit of a legend back in the day. Inky Tulloch, a few of the good old hard drivers. They did it tough in the early days, but it's good racing. I remember as a kid you watch it. Always wanted to give it a crack, so here we are.
The rain is falling at Winton Motor Raceway as we get ourselves set for the second race of the weekend for the Super Trucks, and a couple of big talking points coming out of race one yesterday. We saw Barry Butwell was very quick, Gary, but spun off the circuit while he was challenging Stephen Zammit for the race lead and ultimately failed to finish.
Well, that's crucial too, because any chance of picking up second in the championship could well have been over and done with by that.
So he'll start at the rear of the field. It's our two title protagonists, Stephen Zammit and Shannon Smith on pole position and grid position 2 respectively. Mark Noonan and Robbie Byrne on the second row. Then we go back to Mark Schultz in the best of the light trucks. Anthony Tringali is back there as well. And also watch out for Lockie Fern and Riley Fern, the brothers in their Isuzus rounding out the field. Frank Amoroso, a non-starter for this one. His co-driver John Falk crashing his truck in one of the team's championship races yesterday. But we're set for a race start here. This is race 2 for the Hi-Tech Oil Super Truck Nationals at Winton Motor Raceway. This round presented by Euro Truck Parts. Side by side, our two title contenders into turn 1. Smith trying to go the long way around of Zammit, but Zammit will be well positioned on the inside. Both of them super late under brakes into turn number 2, and it's Smith who runs off the circuit. Zammit back up the inside and having to jump on the brakes there. Mark Noonan in third position to avoid going straight up the back of Shannon Smith.
It was a bold move going around the outside, but it had repercussions, didn't it, for was potentially our race leader, but now in second position as Zammit starts to pull away out in front.
Well, Shannon Smith knows that he has to start taking some risks now. The points margin has become elongated between him and Stephen Zammit since race 1 yesterday, and it was almost a brilliant move from Shannon Smith at turn 2, but wasn't quite able to pull it off. We're right on board with Anthony Tringali. The International Transstar has been pretty competitive in the wet so far this weekend.
They've been doing a lot of suspension work with this truck. Travis Williams has been working on this. He co-drove it in the team's events yesterday and is now reaping the benefits of what they've been doing to get this truck to go quicker and quicker.
Stephen Zammit out in front, and he's pulled some margin over Shannon Smith, who slots into second position. Mark Noonan, the International Transstar, sitting in third spot. That's another truck that's had some work done on it since the previous round. And Mark Noonan basically said, I'm pretty happy with how the truck's performing. Now it's just a case of me learning how to drive it properly. Barry Butwell, he was quick in the wet in race 1 yesterday, but starting down the order after the non-finish, he's having to work his way up through the field.
Yeah, unfortunately had a spin out of that corner there at turn 2. We go back on board, we get another look at this good save actually from Shannon Smith. He could have well been over in the murky conditions off track where he wouldn't have been able to get out of.
He's looking out the back of Stephen Zamet's truck, and Zamet, good evasive action there, had to jig to the right to avoid Smith as he came back onto the circuit. You can just say that the rest of the field there got checked up, including Mark Noonan, Robbie Fern and Anthony Tringali.
So at this stage, Zamet has a little bit of a lead. You can see Butwell's trying to make up some ground. He gets on the inside of Tringali in the cleavage part of the track, and it looks like he's got the job done.
Tringali trying to fight back on the inside at turn 6, but Butwell holds his ground. That Max Superliner has been, you'd have to say, probably the best performing truck in these wet weather conditions, and he's starting to slice his way up through the field. Barry Butwell pretty angry at himself after spinning it off the circuit while battling with Stephen Zamet for the lead in race 1.
Now setting his sights on getting past Robbie Fern, and does the job. So slipped down the inside, got him under brakes, and now he's moved up one more position. And now Fern will have to deal with Tringali coming up behind him at this stage.
These trucks are not easy to drive in these wet weather conditions. They use the same tyres in the wet as what they use in the dry weather, and as you can imagine, these big heavy trucks that have motors that produce so much torque, they can really become quite a handful. You have to arm wrestle them on the exit of the slow corners. Watching some replays of Butwell carving his way up through the field.
And here's the move he made on Fern, coming down into the S's just before the start-finish line, gets the job done.
Under brakes, isn't it? The Barry Butwell truck really able to make up a lot of ground on a lot of the other trucks, particularly at the end of the back straight, heading into the S's at turns 8, 9 and 10. Back on board with Anthony Tringali, who has a bird's eye view of the battle between Barry Butwell and Robbie Fern. Butwell starting to catch up to the back of the next truck ahead, which will be Mark Noonan as well. The light trucks, the Isuzus of Mark Schutz and the brothers Lockie and Riley Fern, a bit further back than we'd normally expect. Those light trucks, because they don't have a lot of weight over the rear axle, they become very twitchy to drive in these wet conditions.
We can see Butwell now putting the pressure on Noonan to get this spot. The Scania holding sway at the moment over the Max Superliner. And you can see that he knows he's there too. Noonan actually started to pull over to the driver's right, going across the start-finish line, just to cover any sort of a move down the inside from the protagonist behind him.
Riding on board with Mark Noonan, gets out onto the ripple strip on the exit of turn 2, and that will just unsettle the Scania. Had to apply a bit of opposite lock there to keep it on the black stuff. Mark Noonan's truck, one of the trucks that runs an automatic transmission, as a lot of the super trucks do. They still, generally, they will still shift manually and select what gear they want, but they don't have to worry about pressing the clutch pedal or synchronising on the down changes as Butwell gets his elbows out, coming through turn number 5 and makes up another spot. Butwell up inside the top 3 now after starting at the back of the grid.
Well, if the room wasn't there to get by, you just make it. And that's how he did it, just by pushing his way through. I guess he's seen a gap and thought, well, I'll go for this, and if it closes, well, I'll wear the consequences. Meanwhile, there's Steve Zamet chalking up what he hopes will be more points to really get that 6th championship title.
So the margin increased after race 1. It went from 12 points to 14 points. If he can grab another couple of points over Shannon Smith, he'll put himself in a pretty good position. 15 points on the table for a race victory in the Super Truck Nationals. So if he can get a greater than 15-point margin, will certainly put the pressure on Smith to do something quite aggressive and risky to keep himself in title contention.
So they're on their final, or not on their final lap, they've got one more after this, and that lead has gone out substantially, hasn't it? I guess from Smith's point of view, you just keep getting the points up even if you aren't getting the maximum ones, and just hope that things fall in your lap in the following races.
He's running second at the moment, Shannon Smith, but Barry Butwell on an absolute charge. Started at the back of the grid, up to third position and rapidly closing in on Shannon Smith. He's punched out the fastest lap of the race as well, Barry Butwell, as he continues to scythe his way up through the field.
And we're just looking on from Noonan's truck, and Noonan's still getting quite sideways, so it's still very slippery out there. They have to feather the throttle somewhat. And as you said before, Lockie, the light trucks are really finding it difficult with no weight over the rear of their trucks, even with that little rear wing that they carry on them as well.
Barry Butwell has caught Shannon Smith, so there'll be one lap to go here. And Smith has to do everything that he can to hold on to second position. He cannot afford to be bleeding more points to Stephen Zammit. Zammit is chasing what would be a record equaling 6th Australian Super Truck title this weekend. If he can pull it off, it will put him level with the late, great Rodney Crick in terms of number of truck championships that have been won.
Certainly will, and he's only got about half a lap or so to do it in for Butwell to get into second position. Meanwhile, Steve Zammit is just cruising towards the line now. Butwell, is he looking for a move there? Probably not the right place to do it, although Smith has run wide out of that corner and Butwell is through.
Pretty much gifting Barry Butwell the position there. Shannon Smith just came in a bit too hot into turn 5. You could say the truck understeering as the front wheels were just scrabbling for grip on the low traction wet surface. Couldn't get the truck turned in to hit the apex, and in the end that's a fairly easy move up the inside for Barry Butwell, who is now second after starting at the back of the field.
And you can see that it did cost him time. Well, we've just seen Fern get past Noonan there on the last lap as well.
I reckon Noonan got a bit of a slow exit coming onto the back straight, but chalking up another race victory, extending his championship lead. Stephen Zammit comes home for the race win, his second win of the weekend. Butwell finishes up in second, and with Shannon Smith getting to the line in third, only just third position for Shannon Smith. It was a slow exit for him from the final corner, and he almost lost a spot to Robbie Fern on the line. But that means that the points margin between Zammit and Smith has increased to 18 points with 2 races to go, and Anthony Tringawi's looped it after crossing the start-finish line. Unbelievable, and shows you just how slippery the conditions are out there.
What's the best place to do it? After the finish rather than before it?
Confirmation of your results then. Zammit, your winner ahead of the hard-charging Barry Butwell. Shannon Smith just finishes ahead of Robbie Fern in position 3. Mark Noonan in position 5. Back to Anthony Tringawi. Mark Shoots best of the light trucks in 7th position. Back then to Lockie Fern and Riley Fern failing to finish that one. Let's check out some highlights. Race 2, the High-Tech Oil Super Truck Nationals at Winton Motor Raceway. And it started with a spectacular move from Shannon Smith in the first couple of corners. Almost made what would have been a breathtaking overtaking move around the outside, but didn't quite get it pulled up in turn 2, Gary.
No, it would have been a great move if it had kept it on track out of that corner. And as we can see from the rear end shot there, that there he is, slipping back a spot because of what happened at turn 2. We get another look at it as well. Here he goes. Oh, and Noonan had to really pull up quick smart to avoid any sort of damage. But we've seen a lot of passing after that, Lockie, and it was the Red Mac that was doing all of it.
Barry Butwell very confident in the wet weather conditions and making up for the disappointing DNF that he had in race 1. He got up the inside of Anthony Tringawi, he got up the inside of Robbie Fern, and then he was chasing down at the top 3, pushed his way past on the inside of Mark Noonan up around the top end complex, and the final drive for victim Barry Butwell's overtaking prowess was Shannon Smith. But in the end it was Stephen Zammit who took victory, extended his points advantage to 18 with 2 races to go. Plenty to talk about after that race. Let's go and catch up with some of our drivers down in the paddock.
wasn't too bad. Me and Shannon went down the main straight, and he had the good line on the start, so that's the only downside of having pole position in the rain here. And he had a good jump, and we interlocked wheels a little bit, and he got himself settled, then just run straight off on turn 2. I thought he was actually going to collide, take me out coming back on the circuit, but no, I got past him, and he was there for maybe 1.5, 2 laps, and I just put my head down, arse up, mate, and didn't look back, and there's a hole straight behind me. So yeah, no, pretty smooth running for me.
Yeah, well, I just had to sit back and watch them until they'd settled down a little bit and spread out, because I knew we're faster than them in the wet, and I knew we could just get them one at a time rather than charging in there and copping carnage. And yeah, just one at a time, pick them off, and it was good. I look at our truck actually always has been pretty good in the wet. It's just the way that the truck is. It's probably a little bit set up a little bit softer, but yeah, it's always done well in the wet. If you drive it properly, you do good times.
First turn, yeah, I tried to keep Stephen on his part of the track, and sort of paid off there in the second turn, but I couldn't keep the steer on the track. So yeah, just we're wet and we're sort of fighting for that position. It's always going to end up in a bit of carnage here somewhere, but yeah, it was pretty good in the end.
Barry Butwell was the big mover in race 2, but you'll have to do it all again in race number 3 because it's a reverse grid race. We're going to flip the order, and we're going to have our fast drivers coming through from the rear of the field. Race number 3, the penultimate race for the 2022 Hi-Tech Oil Super Truck Nationals, is up next. You are watching round 3 of the Hi-Tech Oils Australian Super Truck Nationals. Lockie Mansell and Gary O'Brien in the commentary box with you. But as well as the on-track trucks, we've also got some historic trucks on display in the paddock. And to tell us more about one very special truck that has made an appearance at Winton this weekend, here's category manager Charlie Zammert.
If you have a good look at this truck here, for a start, you've got spider wheels. They're banned now. We can't use them only because the speeds that we go to, the grip that these trucks have, could probably blow those the lug nuts off. If you have a good look at this truck, it's a basic. It's what we thought was going to make it go fast. Not necessarily made it go fast. It's what we thought was going to make it go fast. So it's basically a standard truck, right? Whereas these things here now, they're just a race vehicle, a complete race vehicle. Even though we sort of really can't. We can't buy any fast parts. We've got to make them ourselves, which is what makes it good for me because I love it. Now there's a lot of interaction with how to make it go fast. Everyone sort of wants each other to be up there, and information gets shared around. Whereas back then, no information got shared around. Different time.
Awesome to have some beautifully presented historic trucks from a variety of different eras on the track at Winton Raceway doing some parade laps. And Gary, trucks obviously a big part of Australian culture due to their necessity in road transport, but truck racing in Australia, it's been going since 1988, so some 34 years.
The irony, of course, is the first meeting at Calder back in 1988 was very wet as well, but since then there's been quite a few different champions. Steve Zammett's got 5. Rodney Crick, who he could well equal this weekend, has 6. Bob Middleton had 4. Bo Hewitt 3. And the great Inky Tulloch from New Zealand has won 3 also. Big crowds back in the days of the 1980s with over 29,000 at Oran Park for one particular meeting. And the biggest crowd they had, biggest collection of trucks they had was 22 racing at Oran Park. And of course, others that have raced in the championship have been Brad Jones, Alan Grice, Dick Johnson, Gary Wilmington, Mal Rose, and New Zealanders Robbie Francevic, who won the Australian title in touring cars back in the mid-80s, Denny Holm, Jim Richards, Avon Hyde, Gary Davies, and Kurt Jorgensen, who came out here from Sweden to run the original Volvo.
But more recently, we've seen drivers like David Cedars, who's gone on to have success in other categories, and also Barry Sheen. So some great categories have raced in trucks over the years. There's some great characters still on the grid to this very day. As we get ourselves set for race 3, a full reverse grid based on the results from race 2. And that means we've got the Fern brothers, Riley and Lockie Fern on the front row of the grid. Back to Mark Schutz in position 3. Anthony Tringali out of 4th spot ahead of Mark Noonan. Robbie Fern, Shannon Smith, Barry Butwell, and our race 2 winner Stephen Zammett starting on the back row of the grid. He'll have to fight his way up through the field.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to be on one of those Isuzus up the front. We've mentioned already that they're having problems getting traction with the light rear ends of these trucks, and they've got all those big heavy beasts coming up behind them.
It's been an interesting start in very treacherous conditions here at Winton Raceway. The fast trucks starting at the back and having to fight their way forward. Despite the inclement weather conditions, still a decent crowd that's turned out at Winton Motor Raceway to watch some spectacular truck racing. It's the brothers on the front row of the grid. Let's see if they show some brotherly love and respect for one another, or if it's elbows out from the word go. Set for the rolling start. Down to turn number 1, you'll see that the trucks are a bit tightly bunched up. That's a rule change in the way that they do their start procedures to try and minimise incidents at the first corner. But we see Barry Butwell with a big move around the outside, and here comes Mark Noonan as well. And look at Shannon Smith up on the curb, barging his way up the inside and spinning into the infield. One of our title contenders is gone at turn 2 and finds himself stuck in the mud.
Hopefully he can get it out of there, although it's not looking good at this stage. In the meantime, we've got Tringali in front, Fern in second, that's Robbie Fern, and Butwell up the third spot already.
Robbie Fern down the inside of Anthony Tringali as they head up into turn 5. You can see that the light trucks have already been shuffled back, and Stephen Zammit, I think he had to take a bit of evasive action there on that opening lap to avoid the chaos that was unfolding around him, but that's a massive blow to Shannon Smith's title chances, stuck in the mud, and the safety car has been called.
Now they'll all have to just slow up and get ready to pick up the... Well, has he just gone past under the safety car?
Well, Barry Butwell certainly hasn't slowed up there. It looks like he has potentially made a move after the safety car had been called. Here's a look at what happened to Shannon Smith. He had to be aggressive, he had to take a risk, because he had to do whatever he could to keep himself in title calculations, but an aggressive move, you could say, that he got up on the very slippery ripple strip at the apex of turn 2. That has unsettled his truck and carted him out into the mud. Good job from the recovery crews to get Shannon Smith towed back onto the circuit, and he'll be able to resume the race, but he will be a lap down on the field, so basically out of contention. And provided that Stephen Zammit finishes ahead of Shannon Smith in this race, Stephen Zammit will have an unassailable championship lead heading into the 4th and final race of the weekend.
Well, now that he's back on circuit, I guess we can get this race back underway. Butwell up the second spot. That's been a great opening lap, but there's a question mark now about whether he'll be able to hold on to that or whether he'll be penalised.
Well, he has readdressed, so he's slotted back in behind Robbie Fern for the safety car restart, but it'll be up to the officials in race control to decide whether perhaps he should have actually just slowed down and not made that manoeuvre once the safety car had been deployed. There is a forlorn Shannon Smith getting up the inside of Mark Schutz. It's not a move for race position because Smith is a lap down after that spin at turn 2.
Yeah, also you can't redress in truck racing as far as I'm aware, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. In the meantime, it's Robbie Fern out in front, and we'll call Butwell in second. He may not stay there. Tringali is next, then it's Noonan in 4th position, and then a gap back as Zammit tries to get past the first of the Fern trucks, so the boys, I should say, and he has Smith right behind him at this point. Yeah, he does make that move work, coming through the cleavage up into the run down the back straight.
Thing here for Stephen Zammit, as he will have seen that Shannon Smith had dramas at the beginning of the race, as we say this is for the lead. Butwell down the inside, makes the move through on Robbie Fern to take the, I suppose we could say, the provisional lead of the motor race. But Stephen Zammit, he knows that he can be a bit conservative in this race. He's seen that Shannon Smith is a lap down and out of contention. So Zammit will know at this point that all he has to do is keep it on the track and get it to the checkered flag, and that will be enough for him to secure the title.
You would think that Butwell will rue that spin in the first race as a result, as a recall. And here's a replay of that pass. And I think he did this in the race before, the same spot, didn't he?
It seems to be his favourite overtaking spot. He's certainly very confident under brakes, and we've seen that the Max Superliner has been quick in the wet all weekend. But I've got some news from race control, Gary, and it's not good news for Barry Butwell. The officials have decided that that move on Robbie Fern when the safety car was deployed was not a legal move, and he is going to have 10 seconds ahead of his race time at the end of this one.
Was there a touch there between Tringali and Fern? I think there was, yeah. Tringali's gone around, just the slightest little bump at the back, and it's been enough in these conditions to spin the International Transstar around.
You're right, it was only the lightest of touches on the run-up through turn number 5, and Anthony Tringali now finds himself parked in a bit of an awkward position. Here's how it looked on board. So Mark Noonan is just down the inside. Like you say, it was only a light touch, but because it happened behind the rear axle there, that was enough to unsettle Tringali's truck and cart him into a spin. It's a shame for Anthony Tringali because he's having what you would have to say is his most competitive round since joining the Australian Super Truck Championship. That international has been a very strong package in these wet weather conditions.
And here he is on the recovery now, as he heads off onto his final lap. Watching him chasing one of the Fern Isuzus down into turn 1. That's Riley Fern, the white Isuzu. Here's a look from Barry Butwell, who is our leader on track, but not necessarily. Depends if he can get the space that he needs. He might hold on to a top 3 spot out of this.
He's certainly not going to be 10 seconds ahead of Robbie Fern as they come out of the last corner, so it will be Barry Butwell who will cross the line in first position, but the race win is going to go the way of Robbie Fern, who comes through in second position on the track in the Volvo. Mark Noonan, good job coming home in third on the track, but by the time we apply that 10-second penalty to Barry Butwell, that's actually going to be second place for Mark Noonan, so one of his best results in truck racing so far as well.
And the result of Smith going off on the first lap has improved Steve Zammett's championship quest with what we would imagine would be a 4th position.
Indeed, and that, by my calculations, will be an unassailable lead for Stephen Zammett. So, by coming home in position 4, Zammett will clinch the title with a race to spare. Robbie Fern, though, comes home to take your race victory in race 3 for Hi-Tech Oil's Super Truck Nationals, presented this weekend by Euro Truck Parts. Well, it was another dramatic start for race number 3 of the Super Trucks of Winton. Shannon Smith, we saw that he got into strife at turn 2 in the previous race. He got into even more strife at turn 2 in this race, trying an ambitious move up the inside, got out onto the curb, got into the side of Riley Fern, went spinning off into the infield, and that was his faint championship hopes over and out.
Yeah, well, it didn't matter whether he was going down the outside or the inside, he seems to have problems at that turn.
So he got stuck in the mud. The safety car was deployed, and that created its own bit of controversy for Barry Butwell, who made a move on Robbie Fern for what was the race lead, but he would later get penalised by the officials for overtaking under safety car conditions. We saw Anthony Tringali copping a tap from Mark Noonan up at turn 5, which saw the international driver spinning and facing the wrong way. He was able to rejoin and recover. It was a case of a rapidly diminishing hole. Only light contacts between the two trucks, but it was enough to cart Tringali into a spin.
And we got on board of him recovering, getting around the Riley Fern truck.
In the end, it was Robbie Fern who took victory in that race. Let's catch up with our drivers down in the pits.
Yeah, considering how wet it is out there, it was a good race. Yeah, getting past the little trucks and a bit of slip sliding, and got me way through, and I was gone.
Yeah, we had a good start. We were doing all right. Yeah, we got through the carnage at the first corner. But yeah, didn't turn out that good because then we got the yellow flag and we passed under yellow. Which never mind. After I'd gone down the straight, I looked to my right to the flags and I seen the yellow was out. I said, we're in trouble here. Better pull up and let Fernie back in front of me. Shannon's probably wrapped up second place and we should end up third. Yeah, that's how. Just go out there and enjoy it. Finish the race without destroying the trucks and we'll be right.
Yeah, I tried to get up the front there and hold it, but it didn't work out. But I couldn't move over. I had sort of 2 wheels in the track, two in the mud, and it was going okay. But I think Riley came across the other truck there and sort of sandwiched him and bounced off him and ended up in the paddock. It's all done, I think. Stephen's got it in the bag now, so just a bit of a fight over second. Reverse grid as well, so it's going to be an interesting race. 10 laps, always test everyone out. So yeah, it's tough, but he's earned it. He's had a fair crack this year, but his truck's it's set up really well for the wet. He's done a good job. He deserves it. So.
Well, Stephen Zammit might now have an insurmountable margin in the Super Truck Championship, but there are still bragging rights on the line as we get set for the final truck race of season 2022. The 10-lap Super Free with a full reverse grid from qualifying is up very soon. This is the third and final round of the Hi-Tech Oils Australian Super Truck Championship for 2022. There was supposed to be a fourth round, Gary O'Brien, but unfortunately with all of the drama happening at Wakefield Park at the moment, that round had to be abandoned.
Made the job for Steve Zammit a lot easier, hasn't it? And while he's kept his nose clean, the others are falling over around him.
So he will come into this fourth and final race with an insurmountable points lead. The grid positions determined based on a reverse of the order in qualifying, which sees Riley and Lockie Fern on the front row of the grid back to Mark Noonan and Anthony Tringali. Mark Schutz and Robbie Fern next, followed by Shannon Smith and then Barry Butwell and Stephen Zammit at the rear of the field. As mentioned in the previous race, the rules have been changed. The field now has to be more tightly bunched together coming up to the rolling start, and that's to try and minimise the number of incidents that we've seen at turn one. Well, it might have minimised the incidents at turn one, but it's been turn two where all of the action's happened in the last couple of races, Gary.
It certainly has, and they also actually go green further along on that straight, where as opposed to where they would have been now in previous events.
So the idea is to have them carrying a bit less speed when they get to the first corner. And it is going to be young Lockie Fern on the outside who will lead them down into turn number one for the first time. Elbows will be out in this race. The championship has been decided, but there are still bragging rights on the line. These truck drivers will still want to put on a good show for the crowd who have turned out in force at Winton despite the challenging weather conditions. We ride on board with Mark Noonan. He gains a spot by slipping up the inside of Riley Fern, moves through into fourth position. That's Anthony Tringali, who's had a really good start, already up to second position behind Lockie Fern on this opening lap.
Well, Tringali had a big spin, or not a spin, but a slide through turn two as he tried to get positions, and he ended up in second spot in the early stages. And while back here, it's a traffic jam basically to find their way around.
Not easy to pass in these trucks, and the weather conditions, if anything, even worse than they were before. The rain has intensified here at Winton Raceway, so there's not going to be a lot of grip on the circuit. We've seen that Anthony Tringali's truck has been pretty handy in the wet conditions all weekend, as Stephen Zammit shoots past Mark Schutz on the run out of turn 8. And here is Tringali challenging for the lead down the inside into the final sequence of corners. And he'll make the move through under brakes and relieve Lockie Fern of position 1.
Look at the amount of water on the track there, and it was Noonan who went down the outside of Fern to get that spot away and then almost threw it away before they got out of the S's.
Huge patches of standing water on the apexes of turns 8, 9 and 10, and that's something the drivers are going to need to be very careful of. You can see the amount of spray that's being thrown up by the truck, so there will be some sections of the circuit that will have considerably less grip just because of the amount of standing water. As we see that Lockie Fern, having lost the lead, is now being elbowed out high and wide as Butwell sends it down the inside at turn 2.
Do you think Barry Butwell's got something to prove in this race?
Well, he'll be a bit frustrated because he'll feel that he's had the fastest truck all weekend. The DNF in race number 1 cost him a lot of points, and he will be wanting to do everything that he can. Obviously, the championship's now out of reach, but second ahead of Shannon Smith is still a mathematical possibility, and that's what Butwell will be aiming for.
Yeah, it didn't help his cause, but then Shannon Smith had a similar situation happen to him, so it'll be interesting to see how they turn up in the end. Tringali continues to lead, Noonan in second, Robbie Fern in third spot, then we've got Butwell and Smith and Zammit just in behind, and it's congestion central around there at the moment.
How good is this? The top 6 trucks absolutely nose to tail. as they complete the second lap. It is an absolute traffic jam, and down the inside here goes Barry Butwell for a move through on Robbie Fern. Can he get the Big Mac Superliner stopped? Only just, and he skillfully negotiates his way through those patches of standing water through turn 7, or through turns 8 and 9.
Noonan all sideways out of that last corner. Now we can see Samet trying to work his way up the inside of Smith. And was he able to get that move done? He's got traffic right in front of him, so I don't know if he's got away with it. He hasn't. But it was congestion as soon as he got up to alongside of Smith. There was nowhere else to go.
Smith managing to hold station on the outside as they negotiate their way around turns 1 and 2. Zamet got a really good exit from turn 2, but just didn't have the track space to go anywhere. In these trucks, because they're so big and so wide, track position is such an important part of these races that Anthony Tringali at the moment leading the race, doing a really good job of fending off the attacks from behind. It's Mark Noonan who's putting the pressure on at the moment. We saw those two trucks came to blows in the previous race.
We've seen the rise of Tringali when he first started racing. That truck was nowhere near the pace, and they've just worked and worked at it. And now it's up there amongst the best trucks going around.
Indeed, and Anthony Tringali, by his own admission, has improved his driving as well, and he's done a really good job in these wet weather conditions. Doesn't really struggle for straight line speed either, the International. He was actually able to pull away from Mark Noonan down the back straight, but Noonan gathers him back up under brakes. We've still got this 6-truck freight train of vehicles all battling it out at the front of the field.
All Noonan's got to do is just keep it on the black stuff, and I think he'd be pretty right there. As we now see Samet again try to get past Smith on a little front straight, the pit straight you'd call it, I guess. And this time I think he's managed to do it. I don't know if Smith would want to stay out where he is there at the moment, given what happened in the earlier race.
He's making a fight of this though, Shannon Smith, and hangs tough on the outside. I thought, like you, Gary, that Stephen Zamet had that move done and dusted, but Shannon Smith has proven us both wrong and manages to hold on to what will be fifth position.
Maybe he learned from the earlier race about where you can place your truck once you get on the outside of turn 2.
Brave driving from Shannon Smith as he continues to position his truck perfectly. Oh, big moment for Mark Noonan at turn 5. Opens the door for Barry Butwell, who's through into second position.
Yeah, I think Butwell basically had the move done. It's just that he got a little bit easier with Noonan having that little bit of a moment on the exit.
Zamet and Smith side by side once again as well, heading into turn 7. And once again, I think it is Shannon Smith who's held on. Here is Barry Butwell challenging for the lead. Down the inside of Anthony Tringali into turn 8. Tringali squeezing him out of road in the braking zone. They make contact. Tringali gets forced wide. Butwell will be on the outside. Wow, Tringali was right across the curb there and fortunately was able to avoid understeering into the side of Barry Butwell, but we do have a new race lead. Butwell is through to the front.
He wasn't going to give that away easy, was he? He really fought all the way that he could, and now he's getting into more trouble. And yeah, another spin for Tringali.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it, after such a good performance to hold on to the lead for as long as he did. Spins it off the road at turn number 1. I think that could have been because he might have had some mud on his tyres from the previous corner, which meant that he would have arrived down at that first corner with a bit less grip than what he would have been anticipating.
I think it might have been the adrenaline was running enough water there to wash the tyres clean fairly quickly, I would have thought, but there he goes around. Very unfortunate. It's not the first time we've seen him spun around. He actually, if you recall, he spun on the slowdown lap in the first race today.
That's what it looks like from Mark Noonan's truck. You can see Mark Noonan glancing out the left-hand side of his truck. Leave me out of this, he says.
Shakes her head and has a bit of a laugh, no doubt. Still, we have this battle between Smith and Zamet. And Smith, what would he be trying to prove? If he stays ahead in Zamet, could he be saying, I've got the pace, I just didn't have the luck? Perhaps.
Well, you always want to finish off the season with a win as well and carry that momentum into the next season. We've seen that Barry Butwell's been very competitive for a number of seasons now in the Super Truck Championship, but he's not been able to put a whole season campaign together, and he would dearly love to be able to fight for the championship. He's had some bad luck with mechanical problems, in particular with turbo failures with the engine of that Max Superliner. They actually reverted to a single turbo setup at one point. They weren't able to get the performance that they wanted, so they've reverted back to the twin turbo configuration. And the truck does seem to be running pretty well now. All Barry Butwell needs is a bit of luck if he is to contend for the title in future seasons.
A little bit of a guard hanging off the left front of Fern's truck, Robbie Fern's truck there, but it shouldn't be a drama. It's a little bit loose, probably from a little bit of contact, because there has been the odd bit of rubbing in getting past in this race.
By virtue of consistency this weekend, Robbie Fern is looking pretty good to finish on the podium overall for the weekend, as is Mark Noonan. In fact, both those drivers have been very consistent throughout all of the races that we've had this weekend.
Well, it's good to see that, at least in the wet weather, that there's not a lot of difference between the top 6 trucks, as you pointed out earlier.
Rain is the great equaliser in any form of motorsport, and the same applies to truck racing. Stephen Zammit's truck, we know, is extremely quick in dry weather conditions. We saw that in qualifying in the previous round in the dry, he went very, very close to the lap record for trucks at Winton Motor Raceway, so we know that there's no performance deficit in the SRZ direct power steering Kenworth. We've seen that truck's had previous success as well, Gary, in the hands of Rob Russell.
Well, it's coming up to 7 drivers' championships, given that it's had such a big history, and it's probably won a fair few of the teams' championships as well.
But at the conclusion of this weekend, Gary, Stephen and his dad Charlie and the rest of the crew at SRZ Racing, they're going to do a bit of maintenance on that truck. They're going to rebuild the engine. They're putting it on the boats going over to New Zealand, and over the summer Stephen's going to race the New Zealand Truck Racing Championship.
Yeah, run their championship a little bit different. They actually have handicap races rather than reverse grid, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes there. And of course, Aussies have been to New Zealand in the past, and likewise the Kiwis have been over here and had quite a bit of success.
Inky Tulloch, probably the most prominent Kiwi driver, you would have to say, Gary, who has come over to Australia and beaten a lot of the Aussies on their home turf, a bit like what we've seen for a number of seasons in the Supercars Championship lately.
Yeah. Well, the Kiwis would love these conditions, wouldn't they?
They certainly would. And here is Stephen Zammit lining up for a move on Shannon Smith. Smith runs the defensive line down into the braking zone at turn 8 and manages to hold out Stephen Zammit for the time being.
Been a good job, and they're still inside of the leaders, which I find fascinating. We felt with the longer 10-lap race that this might not have been the case, but certainly has been very close all the way through.
There's no doubt that the inclement weather conditions have made overtaking quite difficult. Once you get out of that, I'm not going to call it a dry line, I'll call it a less wet line. It does become extremely slippery. There's still patches of standing water off the racing line in a lot of corners, which makes overtaking tricky in these conditions, and that's why they've been nose to tail for so long, because it's pretty much a single file racetrack out there at the moment.
Yeah, apart from Shannon Smith and Barry Butwell, who have been doing most of the passing and also most of the spinning, you're right, there hasn't been a lot of other ways to get past trucks in front of you.
So here is the race leader, Barry Butwell. He was first across the line in race 3, but popped a post-race penalty, which relegated him back a couple of spots. This time, no cloud hanging over his head other than the clouds that are in the sky, and lots of them here at Winton Motor Raceway this weekend. But in terms of the race situation, Barry Butwell very much in control at the moment. Zammit again with a good run out of turn 7, pulls up alongside Shannon Smith in the braking zone at turn 8, but he'll be on the wrong side of the road. Smith will be on the inside line, and once again manages to fend off Stephen Zammit in the battle for position 4.
He'd be testing the water out there, no doubt, by feigning to the left-hand side, knowing that the move wasn't on, but at least giving something to Shannon Smith to worry about.
Testing the water being the operative word out there, because as we've said, when you pull off the racing line, there is a lot of water, as a mistake from Robbie Fern running wide at turn 1 and loses a couple of spots with both Smith and Zammit getting through.
We'll keep an eye on Zammit, because he is a chance to try and pass Smith at some stage. Where's the opportunity going to come? Is it going to come in the cleavage, or is it going to go down to that final corner into the S's?
While those two are battling, the top two have pulled away. Barry Butwell with the nice margin over second place, Mark Noonan in the Scania. Mark Noonan's had a really good weekend. Very satisfied with the way that truck's performing. Hard to believe based on how well that Scania goes out on track that for a number of years it's had pretty much derelict in a farm field and had to be totally rebuilt. It was formerly raced by Mark's dad, Brian Noonan, but it's great to see it back out on track and looking so beautifully presented.
Coming down to start the final lap after they get through these corners, so there won't be much more chance for Zammit to try and pick a spot off, although Smith has understeered wide out of that corner, and now Zammit will try and get down the inside of him. Will they go side by side through turn one again?
They will, and I reckon that this time Stephen Zammit will be in a better position. Once again, Shannon Smith is going to try and hang around the outside. He'll make a fight out of it, but Zammit has the track position and will swing through into third spot at turn number 2. And like you said, Gary, that was all set up because Shannon Smith made a mistake at the second to last corner, understeered, that compromised his exit speed out of turn 10, and that was what allowed Stephen Zammit to pull up alongside and get down the inside into turn 1.
There we see Smith now just rounding out one of the Isuzus, knowing that the fight is basically done.
Low light conditions here at Winton Motor Raceway, and we're starting to see the front brake discs on some of these trucks glowing red hot, as you can imagine, given the high mass of these vehicles. The brakes do work very, very hard, especially here at Winton where there's not a lot of recovery time for them.
So is it possible that Zammit may get another spot on this last lap? In the meantime, no. Barry Butt will come down through the last series of corners for the final time.
So Barry Butwell, it's been a weekend of what might have been for the back Superliner driver blisteringly quick in the wet conditions, but a DNF in race 1 set him back some points, but he does take out the final race of the season in the 2022 High Tech Oil Super Truck Nationals. Mark Noonan manages to hold out Stephen Zammit in the run to the line, and then it's Shannon Smith who comes home in 4th position with Robbie Fern completing your top 5 finishes across the line. Another sensational weekend of racing for the Super Trucks despite the weather conditions. Confirmation of your results, Butwell from Noonan, and your newly crowned champion, 6-time champion Stephen Zammit in 3rd spot. Back to Shannon Smith, Robbie Fern, Anthony Tringali after an unfortunate spin, finishing down in 6th position. Lockie Fern best of the light truck runners in 7th with Mark Schutz and Riley Fern completing your field.
Highlights of the Super Prix, and a very tight start to this one with them all formed up. Reverse of qualifying, of course, and very tight into turn 1 with Barry Butwell making a move on one of the Fern Isuzus.
The conditions for the wettest they've been all weekend, and that made overtaking even more difficult than what it would normally be in super truck racing. And Anthony Tringali did a really good job in the opening laps. He was under massive pressure from behind, but he did a sensational job to keep the lead for as long as he did. However, it all came unravelled for him at turn 1 with a spin while running in 2nd position just after being overtaken for the lead by Barry Butwell. That caused the number 92 International Transtar driver to drop down to 6th.
Yeah, it wasn't the way that he wanted to finish. He held them out for so long. He did such a good job. And then we've seen this great dice between Smith and Zammit. Came down to the last lap before he made the move stick and the run to turn 1.
That was all set up with a slight mistake for Shannon Smith heading into the final sequence of corners. It has been a great fight between him and Stephen Zammit. It was eventually Zammit who took the position. But coming through to take the win, Barry Butwell, who had been really, really fast all weekend in the wet conditions, finally managing to get the job done. In terms of the final championship points, Stephen Zammit takes his 6th Super Truck title by 32 points ahead of Shannon Smith. Barry Butwell, in the final analysis, just 3 points behind Shannon Smith, so the non-finish for him in race 1, you would have to say, costing him the runner-up spot in the championship. Robbie Fern, 4th in the standings ahead of Mark Schutz. Frank Amoroso. No points for him out of the last 3 races this weekend, finishing up equal on points with Mark Schutz in position number 5. It is Celebration Central down in the Super Truck paddock. Stephen Zammit earning a record equaling 6th national title. Let's catch up with our Super Truck combatants down in the paddock.
You know, we didn't expect to be in this position after the season that we had, but yeah, the last 2 rounds have been good to us, so we're happy to take this one. Lucky that the truck is so good out in the wet, and the team have done just such a great job of preparing it.
Yeah, we tried our best, but yeah, Stephen, he earned it. He did well. There's probably a few issues there that cost us, but at the end of the day, that's racing, and we'll be fighting next year for it. So
It's been a long, hard year, and we've worked our asses off to get this back in the stables back at Ingleburn, but mate, super stoked to get it back. And man, it was a tough year. All year was very strong. The competition was, mate, it was really good quality this year, so we really worked hard for it.
Well, there you go. Stephen Zammit has well and truly established himself as one of the legends of Australian super truck racing, and no doubt he will be back in 2023 to defend his title. Thanks for your company right throughout the 2022 coverage of the Hi-Tech Oils Australian Super Truck Championship. On behalf of Gary O'Brien, I'm Lockie Mansell. See you next time. Bye for now.